You're watching Cetome TV. Knowledge is power.
Okay, so now we have a question from Beth who wants to know, does intermittent fasting prevent cancer?
That's a great question. As you know, I'm a big fan of intermittent fasting. I've been watching the studies for the last, 40, 45 years. We first started, we first started learning about the benefits of fasting and calorie restriction, unfortunately, from the Germans and the Nazis during the war. There was a lot of human research, which, was a very terrible thing. But as a consequence, there was some beneficial information that was obtained from that, that helped us understand, the limits of the human body, because, as you know, the Nazis really pushed people to their limits.
Yeah.
So one of the things that seems to be a theme is concentration camp survivors that were starved tend to have fairly long survival rates when they got out of the concentration camps. They lived into, fairly elderly years. And we believe that is due in part to calorie restriction. So there's been a lot of studies on calorie restriction. Reducing your calorie intake to 2/3 has a variety of defined mechanisms that we know now to be a factor in aging. And as you know, aging is a mechanism that's involved with cancer. As you age, the telomeres that protect the caps of your chromosomes start to deteriorate. And as they deteriorate, and as you approach your Hayflick number for every cell type, then you get more genetic mutations and less protection of these end chromosomes, or these end caps of the chromosomes, and you get more DNA mutations and you start developing cancers. So the less you cause a cell to copy itself, the lower your metabolism, the longer you live, and the lower your chances are of cancer. So every time you reproduce and copy a cell, you run the risk of inducing genetic mutations that can not be repaired, or genetic alterations that cannot be repaired that lead onto genetic mutations. So having a low metabolism is really important. And if you look at a lot of creatures across the different species, you'll see that the creatures with the lowest metabolism live the longest, and the creatures
Like
with
the whales, their heart beats once every 2 minutes or something like that.
And then the creatures that have the highest metabolism, like squirrels and rodents and so on, and rabbits, they don't live as long. They reproduce more.
A couple of years, maybe.
Yeah. Now this is a practice or a process where the longer you live, the less able you are to adapt to to changes, because you have less genetic reproduction.
So pros and cons.
So there's pros and cons, definitely, but cancer is an evolutionary process that's gone wrong.
And what you're saying is intermittent fasting helps your metabolism.
It slows your metabolism down.
Okay.
Your bile cells, and bile is a huge carcinogen, because you're digesting less food, you're using less bile, you're putting less pressure on your digestive system. And a digestive process is really a complex, difficult process on your body. So the more you digest, the more harder it is for you to digest, the more you tax your body over time. And as I said, bile is a huge carcinogen. Also, you're producing a lot of insulin, and cancer cells just love insulin. And, there's a lot of factors there. So greatly restricting your calorie intake can really slow down your metabolism, which has a host of other benefits.
So the question was, does it prevent cancer? Can that be said? Yeah.
Yes, it can.
Okay, it helps.
So the studies have shown three things. Number one, intermittent fasting at, I believe it's 2/3 of the recommended calorie intake. And so the common intermittent fasting that is very popular, in fact, there was a study in the New England Journal of Medicine just last week that was a summary of a lot of different studies, and they showed how it really benefited human health. And so what they did was they had a eating period of 6 hours and then a fasting period of 18 hours.
Oh.
And now within that fasting period, what it does is it switches to a ketone-based digestive process. So your body is switching to burning fats rather than sugars. And that's one of the
And
processes
that's where your
that happens.
toxins. So
Yes, it is. But it also has a consequence of these other mechanisms, not just ketone based. There's many other mechanisms like reducing insulin and so on. So the overall consequence of this intermittent fasting, and you could do it 2 days a week, is that you have lower plaque in your arteries, lower cholesterol levels, lower insulin levels, sugar, lower diabetes levels, lower cancer levels, lower heart disease levels. And in just about every study, they found that it increases the survival time of the species by a significant amount. I believe it's up to 40% in some species.
wow.
So if you have a human that has a 75-year average lifespan, with intermittent fasting, we're seeing people living 100, 110 years old, 105 years old, and retaining their health through those elderly years.
Okay, and you talked about this New England Journal of Medicine article, and you mentioned 6 hours, like you can eat within the 6-hour period, fast for 18.
Fast for 18, yeah.
And that's 2 days a week?
I didn't look at the exact schedule, but it was just based on that.
Okay, because there is the 5 and 2.
The
right,
5 and 2 is what I feel has the best data right now.
Okay.
Now, it's interesting to know, the BBC had that series. They had a wonderful series quite a few years ago with Michael Mosley, was it? And he went around to the different universities and he tried each one of these diets. And he's a doctor, and he had his blood tested after each one. And so there's an approach where you can eat anything you want and then have nothing the next day for 24 hours. So a day on, a day off. And then there's another one where I believe he went about 5 days without any food whatsoever per month. And then he tried the intermittent, which was basically 2 days a week, where you do, you eat, regular diet. And then for one 24-hour period of time, you restrict your calories to, I believe it was 600 calories for men and 500 calories for women in that 24-hour period. So that's, it's one small meal in that 24-hour
So 2 days
period.
regular eating, 1 day of this 500 to 600 calorie.
No, there's 3 different approaches here.
Yeah, I understand. I'm just repeating this third one, which is
2 days a week.
Yeah, that's right.
2 days a week where you do this intermittent fasting.
Okay, right. So you might have, which is where I was going, kind of 2 days of regular eating, and then you might have 1 day where you do this 500 to 600 calories, and then another couple of days, and that is the 5 and 2. Essentially.
That's the 5 and 2. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's my favorite because it's the most doable.
And this man in this.
So, anyways, the consequence of this is he found that literally based on blood markers and so on and overall health, most of the studies were achieving relatively the same results. So, you can fast for 5 days a month. It's going to last for a month, and then you're going to have to do it again. If you can make it through that 5 days, I think that's a little harder on your body. I wouldn't recommend that. The eat 1 day and then don't eat the next day, that can also be a little challenging for a lot of people. So I think the 5 and 2 is really a great compromise because you do get to have that one, 500-600 calorie meal within your fasting period. So you're not going completely insane. And I have tried this. It's quite difficult, but the benefits are huge, in blood markers and overall health. So if you can do the 5-2, I would say everyone should give it a shot.
So it does help. And
now you are going to want to talk with your doctor first before doing this. I mean, there's many circumstances, like if you have a metabolic disease or something, or some other condition, you want to make sure you're healthy enough to be able to do these diets. So don't just run out and do this diet without first talking to your doctor.
But there is some good science and good support behind the 5 and 2 diet and the concept of intermittent fasting being helpful.
Yeah, and most of the data comes from this extended lifespan studies. And so, the reduced cancer risks and the reduced heart disease and so on, cardiovascular disease, strokes, are all secondary measures as a consequence of these studies.
All right.
Thank you for watching Ketone TV. Subscribe below and stay informed.